Welcome back to the OMR Podcast, Mr. Scott Galloway. Hi.
Thanks for having me. Good to be here.
This time from London.
Yeah, we moved here about 8 months ago.
How come?
You know, it's the obvious questions that are difficult to answer. So, a variety of things. We wanted to, just from a personal standpoint, we've always wanted to live in another country. I've never lived in another country. My kids have never lived in another country. I wanted to give them the exposure to something different. My parents are originally from the UK, so I've always felt a calling. I've always just loved Europe. And 5 years ago, we said, in 5 years, we're moving to Europe. And it comes around, and we moved. But I wouldn't say there was any kind of event, if you will. I think the honest answer is the reason we moved to London is because we can.
Okay.
We're blessed with the flexibility and the resources to do something wonderful, so we did it.
And is it going to be 1 year stint, or are you going to go back soon?
No, I don't think it'll be 1 year. We enrolled our kids in school here, and they really are enjoying school. And my oldest is in ninth grade, so I can't imagine pulling him out of school to go to a different school, and I can't imagine not living in the same country as him. So I would imagine we're here for at least 2 or 3 years. But, you know, you never know. When I moved to New York, I thought I'd be there for 3 years, and I was there 10 years. And then Florida was 10 years. So who knows? But I imagine we're here for at least a few years.
We've talked about this before, but I mean, many of the listeners probably don't know, but you have strong connections to Europe and especially Germany anyways, right?
Yeah, well, my wife was raised in Germany and considers herself German, and I've done a lot of work in Germany. You know, the reality is, if I spoke German, we probably would have moved to Munich. I spend a lot of time in Germany. I love it there, and my wife is German, so yeah, we have strong connections with Germany.
So what's your perspective now after all this month in London and those ties on Europe and maybe especially on Germany? How do you see us?
Well, I mean, there's a big difference. It's sort of reductive to just say Europe, right? Because Greece is much different than Ireland, and the economies, the culture is just so different. I would say that other than just having really shitty weather, my observations of London are just the incredible density of wealth that has flowed in over the last several decades. I've been coming here 2 or 3 times a year since I was 5. And essentially, London has had a multi-trillion-dollar facelift because of private property laws that enable anyone with capital to come here, buy a house, and start, doing business here. And whatever they bring in here is kind of untouchable by, you can be a war criminal and kind of come to London and do your business here. And it's also established itself as sort of the jumping off point to Europe. But the British, who seem to be outstanding at snatching defeat from the jaws of victory, Brexit, from an outsider standpoint, every European nation has grown over the last 5 years except for the UK. And that is a direct function of Brexit. So it seems like things were just going a little too well for them, and they decided to fix that. Germany is just has always been kind of the engine of Europe. And what's always fascinated me about Germany is a reverence and respect for the middle class. Whether it's vocational programming, 50% of people in Germany have some sort of vocational certification versus only 5% in the US. And there's some, that's an amazing thing. And then even boards of directors, they mandate that a certain number of people on your board represent the workers. So the result is the income inequality hasn't been quite as extreme in Germany. The middle class has done better. You don't have the same number of billionaires. You don't have the same number of, runaway successes. But it seems like it's more of in many ways a healthier model. Now, the downside to that is that because the downside isn't as great, that if you're a talented kid coming out of high school and you've got some abilities, go to get a vocational certification, go to work for an auto company, you're going to have a pretty decent life. Whereas in the U.S., the downside is much greater. You do not want to be without skills here in the U.S. My father, who immigrated from Europe, always said, America is a terrible place to be stupid. And what I think he meant was, it's a terrible place to be unmotivated because we don't have the same safety net here. The downside to that is entrepreneurship. The culture of entrepreneurship just isn't as strong in Germany, would be my assessment. If you think about Germany, I think it's about double the size, or 50% greater than the UK economy, but the United Kingdom has more unicorns and probably, a stronger startup scene at least in terms of valuation. And so Germany, because of, I think, more of a risk aversion, more of it's a more honorable path towards the middle class, which on the whole I think is a good thing, has resulted a lack of incentive to take the kind of risks you see in the UK, much less the US, and do startups. I've gotten to know the guys from Celonis, and I think right now they're the second most or the most valuable startup in Europe, and they'll probably be the biggest tech IPO in Europe for a while, if and when it happens. It'll probably happen, I would guess, in 2024. But that could literally jumpstart or re-jumpstart the startup economy in Germany, because typically what happens is you have a company that goes public and creates billions or even hundreds of billions in wealth, and the people who register that wealth are fond of that city, so they stay there. They don't want to work 60 hours a week. They only want to work 40 hours a week. So they start a venture capital firm and they start seeding all sorts of startups, and they create an ecosystem. It happened with Dell in Austin. It's obviously happened over and over in the US and everywhere from Boston to, North Carolina. There's kind of startups hubs that have emerged everywhere, but it hasn't happened a lot in Europe. So I think you're going to see probably not an explosion, but an increase in startups just based on a few companies that are doing very well in Germany.
So obviously you're following Celonis, the Munich-based company. Is that also the reason why Munich is your chosen city, or was your chosen city in case you spoke German?
No, I just met the guys from Celonis recently. I was just so blown away. I was forwarded their numbers in their pitch deck, and I was just so blown away by their numbers that I reached out to them and met with them just because I was interested in learning more about the company, because I want to understand more about the European tech system. The reason, purely my interest in Munich is I just think Munich's one of the most beautiful, livable cities in the world. And I got very close, or did a lot of work with the folks at Borda Media through the DLD conference, which I go to every year. But I just think Munich's a world, just from a lifestyle standpoint and a place to visit. I think Munich is one of the most livable cities in the world. And I think Hamburg is one of the coolest cities in the world. It's like Karl Lagerfeld exploded into a city. It's just the juxtaposition of, you see an enormous crane and industry next to a beautiful, €1,000 per square foot condominium in all glass. It's like Wallpaper Magazine turned into a city. It's a really unique city. And I enjoy Berlin. I enjoy Berlin because I like World War II history. I just think it's fascinating. And it's obviously got a very, very kind of interesting startup scene. So yeah, I'm obviously a huge fan of Germany.
Any other German companies that you follow a little bit? I mean, maybe listed companies or private companies or whatever? I'm
trying to think. I mean, a little bit Zalando, just because they're in the e-commerce space. But I wouldn't say, obviously SAP, the Dutch company, I forget what it's called, the chip maker that I think is the most valuable company in Europe. But I'm not very well versed in the German startup scene.
How about Axel Springer? I mean, German company that's trying to make some moves in the US. Axel Springer, Matthias Döpfner, the CEO, is like purchasing American publishing assets. Is that something you follow?
Yeah, I know Matthias, and I think he's a great leader. And I love the assets he bought. I think he bought Business Insider, which I think is a fantastic resource and something I enjoy. I think they also bought Politico. So yeah, Matthias is a visionary leader. Everyone said he was overpaying for these assets, and it ends up that they have paid off for him. It's kind of nice to see an iconic European company invading the U.S. versus vice versa. But yeah, I absolutely follow what Axel Springer does. And there aren't that many traditional companies with traditional media roots who've been able to kind of make the leap to digital. So, and they're one of them. He's done a great job.
Did you notice that there's a lot of public discussion here in Germany concerning his role, his opinions? There's stuff has come out. There's been reports about private SMS that he sent with very controversial perspectives. Anything that came to your attention?
Yeah, I think that a lot of that is just gossip. I mean, you're speaking about the kind of the correspondence he had with Elon Musk, and
that's among other things. But that's one. But there's a couple others, like he had with the former editor-in-chief of Bild, the big tabloid. So there's a lot going on right now here in Germany.
Yeah, look, the honest answer is I'm not that familiar with it. What I will say is that the media is fascinated by famous people and is always looking for soft tissue to shed them in a poor light. Also, I will say that the media has a liberal bias, and when a CEO is not of that what I'll call woke culture, I think the media is more inclined to report on it, which is neither good nor bad. But I think Matthias got caught in sort of I think people expect people from media to be exceptionally progressive, and if they reflect anything but a progressive viewpoint, I think they get more scrutiny from other media outlets who are usually traditionally pretty progressive. But I don't know, unless you're doing something illegal, I kind of feel as if your texts are private, and it just feels kind of gossipy. I mean, I wonder when all my texts are going to come out, and I could imagine that people could, make me look like, shed me in a pretty poor light by cherry picking certain communications.
What's your perspective on this progressive or woke culture in general? I mean, I read an article in the Rolling Stone magazine a couple of days ago that says like what they call woke companies seem to be more successful, even despite the fact that there was expected for them to be less successful. Now it seems the opposite might be true, but it's a very random sample. There's a lot of discussion about that, and it's not very clear what woke means, but I'm sure you have an opinion on that.
I mean, it's a complicated topic because I consider myself a progressive. I think, the basics around women's rights, women having choice, making an effort and investing in a society where people from different backgrounds who traditionally haven't had the same access to the same opportunities, that is worth investing and fighting for. And I think most progressive values come from what I'll call a good place. There's definitely instances where it's gotten out ahead of itself. Universities where students or faculty are shamed if they don't demonstrate progressive values. 97% of the faculty at Harvard self-identify as Democrats. And universities are supposed to be places of provocative thought. And what my colleague Jonathan Haidt describes as everyone's barking up the same tree, that everyone's kind of supposed to sign up for a narrative that is usually a very progressive narrative. And if they're not, they're seen as quote unquote dangerous. And that is especially upsetting in a university environment where the whole point of a university is to be provocative and say, quite frankly, what might seem at the time to be offensive things. Companies that are, I think there's a difference between correlation and causation. Younger people are more progressive, traditionally speaking, in urban cities. And so the companies that have added the most shareholder value tend to be technology companies, which tend to be younger and tend to be located in urban centers. So they just are going to initially draw from a talent pool that is more progressive. So I don't know if it's their progressive values that is driving good outcomes or just the fact that they attract people that are more progressive to begin with. Where I think companies sometimes make a mistake is I tell young people to not bring your whole self to work. I don't think you should really discuss politics at work. And I think when CEOs start discussing progressive politics at work, oftentimes they're more virtue signaling than they are really willing to place resources around this. And unfortunately, what it does is it trains employees, especially younger employees, that their political views have a role at the company. And I don't think that's true. I think corporations or organizations or legal entities that are constructed to help people establish economic security for them and their families, and their beliefs and their activities outside of work are their own and shouldn't fall under the scrutiny of the organization. And if you want to join the NRA or you want to protest, protest whatever cause it is you're upset about or protest in favor of it, I think that's your business. But I think it's gotten to the point where companies now feel as if they need to take a stand politically. And a lot of people at the company feel like to express their political viewpoint is their right. And I think it's their right, but I don't think it's appropriate in a lot of instances. I think that I think it's dangerous to to have a company where people are expected to sign up for a certain political ideology. I think that's very personal. I think people should be able to have the political viewpoint they want, and that a corporation, for the most part, is there to create economic value and economic security for its employees. So I wonder if it's just gone a little too far.
I mean, you recently experienced some kind of, it looked like at least, controversy involving Twitter. I mean, it seemed like your Twitter account, which is quite large, was shut down.
Yeah, but to be fair, I don't know if it was shut down or that so many people have been laid off that when I couldn't get in and I sent in a customer service form or complaint, that they just don't have the people to respond. To be honest, I don't know if I'm important enough that Elon Musk would take the effort to ban me. So
I think he noticed you. I mean, he knows who you are. I mean, you other critical perspectives quite frequently on him, and he responded to some of them already. So he must know.
Yeah, he does know me, and he's called me names on Twitter. But I don't know. I think the most, Occam's razor, which is the most obvious explanation, is oftentimes the right explanation. And I think the most obvious explanation here is there was a technical glitch. I wasn't able to log into my account. I filled out several forms online saying I can't log in. And it took them 2.5 weeks to fix the issue, which is when you lay off 80% of your staff, it's understandable or logical that customer service would degrade substantially. So that is what I would guess happened. I don't think it was some Machiavellian effort to keep me off of the platform.
Okay. Well, what's your current perspective on Twitter? I mean, it looked very problematic in the first place. Now it seems like they're maybe getting the turnaround to go.
I don't know. I think it's been a total disaster. He purchased it for $44 billion. When the debt starts trading, he raised $13 billion in debt. Supposedly the debt, when it starts trading or when the banks try and sell it, it might trade for 50 or 60 cents. And if the debt trades at 50 or 60 cents, what the market is saying is that debt gets their money back first if the company goes bankrupt. So if the market thought the company was worth $13 billion right now, those bonds could be sold at 100 cents on the dollar because they get their money back first. So if they go out at 50 or 60 cents on the dollar, where the market is saying the company's worth $6 to $7 billion, and he paid what, 44 billion or 42 billion just 8 months ago. So in terms of value destruction, I don't think you've ever seen this type of value destruction this quickly. And a lot of it is self-inflicted injuries. The company has lost somewhere between 60 and 70% of its ad revenues. And that's not because of the economy. That's not because they don't like the ad stack or they don't like the product. It's because they don't like Elon Musk and what they feel is really reckless behavior. And so these are totally self-inflicted wounds. And I don't know if you saw the BBC interview, but he claims he's kind of positioned himself as saving it from bankruptcy. This was a company not headed towards bankruptcy. I mean, it wasn't making money. In some years, it was cash flow negative, but it had a $35 billion market cap. It could have easily, and it didn't have any debt. So it was not a financially strained company. By coming in and behaving in what a lot of people felt was a reckless manner, advertisers abandoned the platform en masse, and he put it into financial stress, financial duress. So, and now he's claiming it's like starting a fire in your backyard and you pick up a hose and you call yourself a hero. So this is a company that he has dramatically downsized. There's been very little product innovation. The subscription product is not working. I think he has demonstrated a side of himself that is really ugly. I think it's going to hurt Tesla. I sold my Tesla. I think there are a lot of people who are less inclined to purchase a Tesla now because of his antics in action. And at just about the same time, a bunch of great electric vehicles are coming on the market, including, the i7 from BMW, or the Mercedes electric car is incredible. Volkswagen's coming for, the electric market. So I think Twitter has been an unmitigated disaster for Elon Musk. And anyone who trusted him and invested in this thing, has seen basically their capital go up in smoke. This is already probably the second worst acquisition in history, just behind AOL's acquisition of Time Warner.
Do you feel like that Silicon Valley in general has changed in recent years. I mean, the people that seem to run Silicon Valley, if you want, and the most dominant media outlets that we here in Germany, the digital interested people, they now listen to the All In podcast, for instance. There's all kinds of new voices coming out of Silicon Valley. It seems like there's a change going on a little bit. How do you see that?
Yeah, there's definitely, I feel as if the Valley has kind of bifurcated into venture capitalists who see themselves as part of a larger whole, see themselves as citizens. It was really kind of came to light in the Silicon Valley Bank crisis, and that is you had hundreds of venture capitalists who put together a letter saying they would support the bank and maintain their funds there, trying to facilitate an elegant, orderly acquisition because they saw the bank and the role the bank played as being important, and they didn't want to see contagion spread through the banking system. And what was more interesting than the venture capitalists who signed that letter was the venture capitalists who did not sign it. And those venture capitalists, many of them have big investments in crypto and Web3 technologies that to a certain extent benefit when America or the banking system is under stress or duress. And I call this group of people venture catastrophists. And some of them were on Twitter. They have very large followings in all caps saying that there would be lines around the banks. Most people would not get their money back, that the correct response here was that you should be terrified. And they were creating, they were not only going into a crowded theater, but a crowded stadium and screaming fire. And in the U.S., our most patriotic citizens are veterans, people who have served in uniform. And what strikes me as really disappointing is some of our most blessed Americans, specifically people who have typically got very good educations, have access to the most robust technology and financing ecosystem in the world, have aggregated enormous wealth, which translates to enormous influence, but they don't seem to be very patriotic. They would rather see the banking system go down such that their Bitcoin investments go up. They talk about their kind of bunkers and plans to either colonize Mars or take us into the metaverse, as opposed to taking their genius and their capital and trying to make the planet we're on more habitable. So I think there's sort of this venture catastrophist, libertarian, anti-American vein running through technology that's very disappointing, that you would think that these people would feel more loyalty and gratitude towards the United States, as opposed to sort of betting on its demise and constantly, I say shitposting America. Elon Musk says his general view is that government should just get out of the way, and he's openly disdainful of government. Meanwhile, he's taken billions of dollars from the government, whether it's for charging stations or for a $350 million loan for his company when it was not doing well, his NASA contracts. I mean, he has taken more money from the government than most companies. And at the same time, he'll call for a pause on AI because of the risks it presents. And then it comes out that he's in fact buying all sorts of equipment to try and implement AI at Twitter, and that he's incorporated to do a new startup at Twitter, a new startup in AI. It just feels as if this community has not done itself any favors, that there's a general feeling that they're not very patriotic, and they're not concerned, that their interests have diverged from the interests of kind of the broader well-being of the United States.
Would you say that Elon Musk, for instance, net is positive for society, for the world, or negative?
I think he's a positive. I think that I think you have to acknowledge that he inspired the EV race. And the world is better off for that. We're going to reduce carbon emissions in America, mostly because of the climate bill that Biden passed. But, Germany, which makes, in my view, the best cars in the world, Elon Musk has absolutely, motivated German automakers to go much faster towards EVs. He's motivated the entire planet to move towards EVs. That's a huge positive for the world. Space exploration, I think, or not even space exploration, but space hauling is a big positive for the world. It creates a lot of value, a lot of shareholder value. So I would say it's a net positive. I feel the same way about tech. The problem is with the word net, and that is fossil fuels have been a net positive for the world, but we still have emission standards. Pesticides have been a net positive for the world, but we still have regulation around, the Food and Drug Administration. What we don't do around technology or someone like Elon Musk is we've decided they're either good or bad, and you have to be all in and worship them or think they're evil, as opposed to the definition of intelligence is you can hold two thoughts in your mind at the same time. And that is you can acknowledge his incredible talent, the good he's done, and acknowledge that he deserves a lot of rewards for it. I think he's the second or third wealthiest man in the world. But at the same time, hold him accountable when he starts accusing his employees of sex crimes, which is just not true. Hold him accountable when he circulates misinformation around violence against the husband of the Speaker of the House here in the United States, speculating that it was some sort of gay scandal. These statements put these people in tangible danger. They ruin people's lives, or they make their lives much harder. And when you're an individual who is of this powerful, you would expect them to behave more responsibly. You would expect them to acknowledge or at least recognize the power they have and show a little bit more grace and, quite frankly, just a little bit more maturity. So is he a net positive? Yes. Has he done ridiculously reckless, childish, stupid things? Yes. And I think we can hold both of those thoughts in our mind at the same time.